Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, members of Congress, commissioners, and distinguished guests, good morning and welcome to today's ceremony. My name is Claire Murray, and I am the Principal Deputy Associate Attorney General. It is my distinct honor to be on stage today with the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General of the United States as we come together to launch the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice and to swear in its commissioners. The Department of Justice is honored to play a leading role in the Commission, supporting law enforcement, including by ensuring that they have the tools, training, and information they need to protect our communities, is central to the missions of both this administration and the Department of Justice. The responsibility for overseeing and leading the Commission is one we undertake solemnly and with due regard for the importance of the work. As we begin today's program, I would ask that you please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Montgomery County, Maryland Police Department Color Guard and the singing of the National Anthem by General Takahashi of the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say thus that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Please join with me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in thanking the Montgomery County, Maryland Police Department Color Guard and Ms. Takahashi. Please be seated. I would now like to introduce the Deputy Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen. Mr. Rosen is the 38th Deputy Attorney General of the United States, the DAG in DOJ lingo. The DAG acts as the department's chief operating officer and advises the Attorney General in leading a department of more than 110,000 employees. Mr. Rosen received a BA with highest distinction from Northwestern University and a JD, magna cum laude, from Harvard Law School. He has had a distinguished career in both private practice and public service. In private practice, he served for many years as a senior litigation partner at the international law firm of Kirkland & Ellis, where he handled complex litigation across the United States, including jury trials, bench trials, arbitrations, and appellate arguments. Among his wide-ranging litigation practice were cases involving antitrust, securities, contracts, RICO, business torts, trade secrets, government enforcement actions, products liability, class actions, and regulatory matters. In the public sphere, he has been confirmed by the Senate no fewer than 3 times. He comes to the Department of Justice from the Department of Transportation, where he served as that agency's deputy secretary. Earlier in his career, he served as general counsel and senior policy advisor for the White House Office of Management and Budget, and as general counsel for the Department of Transportation. He was also appointed public member of the Administrative Conference of the United States. The DAG is a committed public servant and a forceful advocate for law and justice. He is a strong supporter of our nation's law enforcement. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen.
Well, good morning. I want to thank everybody for your attendance and for your support for this very special event. It's my deep honor to participate in the inauguration of an institution as significant and eminent as the President's Law Enforcement Commission. Before I get started, I would like to take just a second to recognize some guests from the White House who've joined us for this extraordinary occasion to express their support for law enforcement, including Assistant to the President Kellyanne Conway, Assistant to the President Joe Grogan, and Deputy Assistant to the President Jerron Smith. Thank you all for being here. And we appreciate we appreciate your support for American law enforcement. So everyone gathered here today doubtlessly understands how important law enforcement is to a free and safe society. We can have neither liberty nor security if citizens live in fear of criminals, and also if they do not trust the government officials charged with their security. Many of you also recognize that law enforcement has never been an easy job, and that perhaps has never been more true than today. While we all admire and appreciate the brave men and women who have devoted their lives to keeping us safe, we should also always find means to improve law enforcement. We owe it to them, and we owe it to us, to make American police the most capable and trusted public servants trained to face modern challenges. It's been over 50 years since we have systematically studied ways to accomplish this. Back in 1965, President Johnson authorized a similar law enforcement commission to study ways to reduce crime. Much has changed in the half-century since. A new evaluation of how American law enforcement can best serve their communities and how we can best address the criminal problems of our time is something we very much need. This is a monumental calling that will require an exceptional and diverse collection of law enforcement leaders. Fortunately, today we are joined by the men and women who will be the commissioners of this important undertaking. The Department of Justice selected these commissioners from all sectors of the law enforcement community: urban police departments, county sheriffs, state attorney generals and prosecutors, elected officials, United States attorneys, and federal law enforcement agencies. So they come from distinct states, cities, counties, and towns all across our country, but share a common mission of safeguarding their respective communities from a variety of threats. It is now my honor to introduce the commissioners of the President's Law Enforcement Commission today. I would ask that you hold your applause to the end. So first, we have Phil Keith, who I would like to introduce as the chairman of the Law Enforcement Commission. Phil Keith currently serves as the 6th director of the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. Next, I'm also pleased to introduce the vice chair of the commission, Katie Sullivan, who currently serves as Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Justice Programs. As I proceed to the commissioners, I'll start with David Bowditch, who's been Deputy Director of the FBI since March 2018. I would also like to introduce Sheriff James Clemens Jr., who currently serves as the Sheriff of Richmond County, North Carolina. D. Christopher Evans, who currently serves as the Drug Enforcement Administration's Chief of Operations and Assistant Administrator of the Operations Division. Next, Frederick Frazier, who not only serves as an officer in the Dallas Police Department, but also as a city council member for the city of McKinney, Texas. Next, Sheriff Bob Galtieri, who currently serves as the Sheriff of Pinellas County, Florida. And then Police Chief Gina V. Hawkins, who currently serves as the Chief of Police of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Coming back to federal law enforcement, Regina Lombardo, who currently serves as the Acting Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Then one of our United States attorneys, Erica McDonald, who currently is our United States Attorney for the District of Minnesota. Moving over to states, we have Ashley Moody, who is the Florida Attorney General. And we have Nancy Parr, who currently serves as the Commonwealth Attorney for Chesapeake, Virginia. And we have Craig Price, who currently serves as the Cabinet Secretary of the South Dakota Department of Public Safety. And Gordon Ramsey, who currently serves as the Chief of Police for Wichita, Kansas. Next, David Rausch, who currently serves as the Director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And then Sheriff John Semeniego, who currently serves as the Sheriff of Shelby County, Alabama. And then Sergeant James Smallwood, who is Sergeant with the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department and is the current president of the Nashville Fraternal Order of Police. And then finally, Donald Washington, who currently serves as the Director of the United States Marshal Service. So now, please join me in thanking all of these men and women for their participation in this historic commission. Thank you all very much for your willingness to serve in this important activity, and we very much look forward to collaborating and working with you. So next, I would like to introduce somebody I think you all know, as just it's been my honor to introduce these fine men and women as our commissioners. It is also my pleasure to introduce the Attorney General of the United States. William Barr is the 85th Attorney General of the United States, and he is one of only 2 people in American history to serve twice as Attorney General. As Deputy Attorney General, I can say with confidence that Attorney General Barr shares our deep respect for law enforcement and a keen appreciation for the significance of today's event. And so, without further ado, let me give you the Attorney General, William Barr.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. It was a little less than 3 months ago. Many of us were together in Chicago at the IACP convention when the president signed the executive order to establish this commission, and so it's a particular privilege today to announce the formation and inauguration of that Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice. And I want to start by recognizing the hard work and vision of many of you here today in the law enforcement community, including Pat Yos and Jim Pasco of the Fraternal Order of Police, as well as Chief Stevens, Chief Sell, Vince Tolucci, and Terry Cunningham of the IACP. I particularly want to recognize the work of IACP, which for over the last 20 years has made the establishment of this commission a national priority. And without that commitment, we wouldn't be here today. We look forward to working with the IACP and all the law enforcement groups represented here today to make this effort a success. In addition to those who the deputy already welcomed here, I'd also like to thank two individuals who will be speaking later during the program who have come here to participate. Commissioner Ben Tucker of the New York Police Department and retired Commissioner Kathy O'Toole of the Boston Police Department. Now, President Trump is an unwavering supporter of our men and women in blue, and he recognized that this commission is much needed to support law enforcement. And it is, to be sure, long overdue. As the deputy mentioned, the last time there was a national commission on law enforcement was in 1965. Much about our world has changed in the decades since President Johnson's commission. The incredible pace of technological change has meant the rapid evolution of new ways to commit and conceal crimes. All of you, because you're on the front lines, know this very well. You see it every day, from the proliferation of synthetic opioids to the use of warrant-proof encryption and the dark web to sexually exploit the most vulnerable members of our society. This commission is critical, not only because it is timely, but also because few callings are more essential to the strength and prosperity of our nation than that of law enforcement. It is the rule of law that is fundamental to ensuring both freedom and security. And it is our more than 900,000 men and women on the beat every day who uphold the rule of law. I have said it before, there is no more noble calling in America than serving as a law enforcement officer. At the same time, law enforcement faces more and greater challenges than ever before. If the new obstacles presented by technology weren't enough, in many communities, our officers also must confront a wave of social problems, such as homelessness and drug addiction and mental illness, problems that demand solutions beyond their authority and expertise. Further, there has been, especially of late, a disturbing pattern and cynicism of disrespect shown to law enforcement. This has resulted in greater violence against law enforcement officers. All Americans should agree that nobody wins when trust breaks down between the police and the community they serve. We need to address this divide. As a result of the significant challenges faced by law enforcement officials today, many departments are reporting declines in hiring and morale. It is particularly alarming that last year more officers died of suicide than any year previously recorded. In fact, more officers died by suicide than in the line of duty last year. These are just a few of the reasons why President Trump directed me to establish this commission. We must not only study crime to forge strategies for reducing it, but examine ways for promoting the profession of law enforcement in order to uplift those who answer the call to public service and to help them earn the trust of the communities that they protect. Accordingly, the Commission will comprehensively assess the most pressing issues confronting law enforcement today. It will seek to provide substantive and actionable answers to, among other questions, the following. How do certain social ills, such as mental illness, substance abuse, and homelessness, affect the ability of law enforcement to carry out its duties? How can we improve the relationship between the police and the communities they serve? How can officers' recruitment, training, and retention be improved? What are the major issues affecting the physical safety and mental health of police officers? What unique challenges and criminal threats have resulted from new technologies? What is the cause of the apparent diminished respect for police officials and the laws they enforce, and how is public safety affected? How can we integrate education, employment, social services, and public health services to help reduce crime and ease the burden on law enforcement? The Commission will principally conduct its studies through hearings, panel presentations, field visits, and other public meetings. At these engagements, the Commission will receive valuable insights, counsel, and recommendations from a diverse range of voices: subject matter experts, public officials, private citizens, academia, community organizations, civil liberties groups, bar associations, and victims rights groups. While I am proud to announce the formation of this commission, I'm also pleased by the distinguished individuals who will serve as commissioners. The Department of Justice was required to assemble a relatively small group from a large pool of highly qualified candidates who were interested in participating. We appointed these commissioners based on a variety of criteria, seeking a range of different perspectives. We specifically sought out candidates who have had significant experience formulating law enforcement policy and leading law enforcement organizations. As you see here today, these commissioners come from across the country with diverse backgrounds from all levels of government, and they have directly confronted, in many contexts, the issues that are going to be studied. They are police chiefs from big cities, from smaller ones, state prosecutors, county sheriffs, members of rural and tribal law enforcement, state public safety officials, federal agents, U.S. attorneys, and state attorney generals. And they have traveled from all over the country to participate in this historic moment. I say to each of you serving as commissioners, you have the mandate to examine the entirety of how we carry out law enforcement in our country. And I ask that you think creatively and boldly, that you test new ideas, that you plan for the future, that you consider diverse opinions and approaches, and challenge each other and challenge the Department of Justice. Your work is important to our success. Our nation is ready for you to begin this critical enterprise, and your efforts may well influence generations. On behalf of the President and the entire Department of Justice, thank you for your service to the country. And now I will ask the commissioners designate to come to the stage to take the oath of office. Please raise your right hands and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will faithfully carry out the responsibilities appointed to me today. So help me God. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have a 15-minute break before returning for the inaugural meeting of the Commission. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Good to meet you. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone back for the second half of our ceremony today. I'm Phil Keith. I'm the COPS Office Director and Chair of the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice. I would like to thank General Barr, Deputy Attorney General Rosen, Principal Deputy Associate Attorney General Murray for their earlier remarks, their leadership in establishing this commission, and their strong support and advocacy for law enforcement and the criminal justice community. I'm greatly humbled that the Attorney General asked me to serve as chair of this commission, but I'd also like to point out and recognize our vice chair, Katie Sullivan. Katie is the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs. Together, Katie and I will look forward to working with fellow commissioners and all of you over the coming months as we study and recommend actions that can be taken to prevent, reduce, and control crime, increase respect for the law, and assist victims. You know, the Department of Justice has a distinguished tradition of working to support the nation's criminal justice system. This commission marks the beginning of another important chapter in that support by identifying and establishing effective crime control, prevention practices we need and will work collectively to reduce crime, increase respect for the law, and assist support victims. It's truly an honor for me as a law enforcement practitioner. Many of you have known me for almost 50 years in this business, to have the opportunity to work with these commissioners, the federal representatives, state, local, and tribal law enforcement, and many others who look to make a historical impact on law enforcement and the justice profession. This commission's work will be driven and informed by those who best understand the issues facing law enforcement and the criminal justice system. We will engage with many stakeholders with firsthand knowledge and expertise on both challenges and successes of keeping the nation's streets safe and caring for the public safety of our nation's citizens, as well as those who are sworn to serve and protect our communities. Today, we begin that dialogue by hearing from one of our professional leaders, New York City Police Department First Deputy Commissioner Ben Tucker. Ben will tell you about the important and innovative work that NYPD is doing to support their officers' physical, mental, and emotional health. Commissioner Tucker joined the NYPD in 1972 and serving in various roles for 22 years. He then continued his public service as executive in several local and federal government agencies, including a 1995 appointment as the Deputy Director of Operations for the COPS Office, serving as the Chief Executive for the School Safety and Planning of the New York City Department of Education, and in a Senate-confirmed position, serving the State and Local Affairs Division within the U.S. Office of National Drug Control Policy. In addition, Commissioner Tucker is a tenured professor at Pace University. His unique blend of law enforcement, public service, and academic experience has led to his reappointment as Deputy Commissioner of Training for NYPD in 2014. Commissioner Tucker was then promoted to First Deputy Commissioner and trusted to design, implement a broad range of policy, programs, and training to strengthen community relations and improve the performance of the department. Personally, I'm fortunate to know Ben for many years, and I can attest to the fact he is a difference maker. Please join me in welcoming First Deputy Commissioner Ben Tucker.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is. I was pleased to get the call from Dean asking if I had an interest and would come down and just share with the group this morning some of the work we've been doing around suicides, suicide prevention. For that, let me just congratulate the commission, members of the new commission, and I look forward to, I listened to that litany of responsibilities that the commission and issues that you're going to focus on, and I have to tell you that I've been in this business 50 years. As of November 21st, that was my 50th year since I was sworn in at the New York City Police Department as a trainee, and I can tell you that I remember what it was like then and where we are now in policing, and it's 180 degrees in the opposite direction, and we're making serious progress across the country. But those issues, some of them are new when it comes to technology and the challenges we face that were laid out, but some of them are exactly the same as they were 50 years ago in terms of the on-the-ground policing that our officers do around issues of homelessness and drug addiction, and a whole host of others, homelessness as well. So we still have our hands full, and the issue I'm going to speak about this morning is no less important. In fact, it may be even more important, or at least at the top of the list of those things that we ought to pay attention to, in part because they don't always happen. They're not something that's, it's a constant, but they happen sporadically, and that's about, what I'm talking about is officer suicide. And so I wanted to spend a little time with you this morning just talking about that, and to give you a sense of what we've been doing in New York to address some of the challenges around officer suicide. The Attorney General gave some statistics with respect to what suicide looks like on a national level, and it's true, as he pointed out, that suicide is a national crisis for all intent and purposes, and more officers die each year by their own hands than are killed in the line of duty by adversarial or within adversarial situations. The rate of suicide, in fact, among police officers, 54%, greater than others in our society here in this country. And if you think about the numbers, they continue to go up. Between January of 16 and as recent as August of last year, we lost 600 officers just in that period of time. And so that's really what we're facing. And what I wanted to do is share with you some of what we're dealing with at the NYPD. So I'll just tell you a little story. On June 5th of last year, I woke up and got a phone call from my chief of our Force Investigation Division, letting me know that one of our one-star chiefs, our deputy chiefs, Steve Silks, has taken his own life. And so Steve is a good friend. Steve was a great cop, and more than 35 years in the agency. NYPD was his life. He wasn't married. He lived alone, and so NYPD was his world. And his birthday would have been July 10th, or was July 10th. And on June 5th, I think in anticipation of his retirement, he just decided perhaps that he wasn't ready to go, and as a result couldn't deal with that. Now, I don't know if that's the truth. We'll never know. That's the thing about suicides. Once people become that hopeless and they decide to do it, the experts say they will carry it out. So even if you may prevent them from doing it on one occasion, to the extent that they have the opportunity to try it again, they often will, and they'll succeed. And Steve was probably in that category, but we don't know for sure. But it seems to us that may be the reason for his taking his life. And so that was an eye-opener. The very next day, however, we had another suicide. One of our first-grade detectives took his own life. And so that was a shock to our system. It opened our eyes to the fact that while we experience suicides on a regular basis, on an average of about 5 a year, the notion that we seem to be experiencing this epidemic, so if you will, with 2 in a row, within a day of each other. And then shortly following on that, a few weeks later, we had a string of others with a total of 10 suicides, mostly by their firearms. I got tired of and depressed by looking at the reports as my team investigated these suicides, and it was always, gun to the head shots. So I think, this is not unique to the NYPD, certainly. Our other colleagues around the country experience it. Our colleagues in the FBI, we met with them and talked about this, and others as well. We've spoken with the IACP, we talked with PERF, we work with with Perf on a one-day conference back in April of last year, never knowing and never anticipating that what was to come in the ensuing months. And so that's the challenge. Chuck Wexler and his team put out a report on just what the world looks like when it comes to suicides. And we held that one-day conference with a whole series of experts, and we hosted it with Chuck and his folks at One Police Plaza in Lower Manhattan. And it was very helpful. We talked about, with a variety of experts across the board, what depression looks like, what mental health, the implications of mental health really are for our officers, and what the challenges are with respect to why we can't get our officers when they are depressed or when they're experiencing some stresses. And we all know about these stresses that impact our lives day to day, whether they're financial, whether they're relationship, with respect to relationships that are not doing well, or just pressures from the job itself. So all of those things, it's a combination, and you never know which combination of those things are really going to send people to the edge and over into hopelessness, which is then going to cause them to take their own lives. Those are all kind of the challenges that we looked at, and we also are looking to try and understand how we can prevent these issues. And so, in light of those initial two suicides at the back-to-back, I was asked to head and convene a task force of about 30 of our. I pulled together about 30 of our senior people from personnel, from our medical division, from our employee relations section, from our family services unit, from our counseling units, all of the various resources, our training division, my force investigation division, all of the services and things that are out there that touch our personnel on a regular basis, to get a sense of what it is that's going on, and what more should we be doing to build on the process that we already had in place for a number of years. And we did have people taking advantage of the services that we provided through our counseling and our seeing our psychologists that were in service, taking advantage of some of those services confidentially, making a call and getting the help that they needed. We also had to deal with trauma and the trauma around sort of what these officers were experiencing, but most importantly, we had to deal with stigma and the myths around what happens if I'm an officer, I need help, but I'm afraid to get the help, primarily because I don't want to be pushed out of the department. I don't want to lose my identity. I don't want them to take my gun. I don't want them to take my shield, right? And if I tell them, then I'm vulnerable, and I don't trust that the agency is going to take care of me. They're just going to cast me aside. So those are real, those thoughts, and so we knew we had to, even though we had almost 1,600 people last year take advantage of the services we were offering, clearly that wasn't enough, because there were those 10 who chose not to take advantage, and those 10 perhaps didn't do so for the reasons I just mentioned, and then some. So we widened the lens, and in the wake of those events as they continued to occur, we felt the impact. The group of people I brought together are the people who these are very senior people, bureau chiefs, deputy commissioners, assistant commissioners, chief surgeons, directors of our psychologists, our psychiatrists, and others who have day jobs, but they, from July 5th forward, and for the next several months, and continuing until now, have been meeting and thinking about ways in which we could address the challenges that we were facing. So we focused on the task force mission, focused on the idea of outreach and education, focused on programs and strategies and services and policies, all designed to encourage long-term sustainability around health, around wellness, and around resiliency. Those are the things that we put focused our sights on with the task force. We revised a whole series of our policies. So when it comes to officers who didn't want to lose their guns, the truth of the matter is, of that 1,600 or so that I referenced that sought help last year, of that, about 100 of those officers, 300 of them were receiving treatment. Of that 300, 100 of those officers had their weapons removed and had their shields removed in the normal course of business because of perhaps the medication they were on and shouldn't have been carrying weapons. These were non-disciplinary issues, by the way. Had nothing to do with discipline and had everything to do with these officers' health and safety. But we had to remove the weapons for those reasons because it was unsafe for them and certainly unsafe for the public. But we also changed our policy immediately around taking the connection between removal of the weapon and removal of the shield at the same time. What we all know, and those of us in law enforcement in this room, I think would agree that when you take this job and you take the oath and you now become part of the law enforcement family, one of the things that you identify with and becomes part of who you are as a person is the gun, is the shield, no matter the rank. And so those things matter a lot. And what we realized is, in most of the instances, as we looked more at the removal policy, we didn't really need to remove the shield, and so we stopped doing that. We changed the policy. We are reviewing the entire removal policy, but in this regard, we thought, let's change the policy immediately. So going forward, you can keep your shield. You could even come to work. Sometimes work is a safe haven. It may not be that the person should sit at home. Sitting at home, you think too much, and maybe that's not the best way to go. So I'm giving you all of these sort of bits and pieces of what we've been looking at and what the experiences we think are based on the reaction that we're getting from officers and what we've heard. We've done surveys, we've conducted focus groups. We try to get as much feedback from our officers and from our civilian staff as well on what their concerns are and try to address those concerns at the same time. So let me just sort of give you a sense of some of the things that we have done to really get a sense of, to really address some of the challenges that we know were problems. We connected with New York Presbyterian Hospital to create something called Finest Care. Confidentiality is central to and one of the issues that we recognize as a problem for officers. They don't want others who don't need to know about the fact that they've sought help or their condition and so forth. So confidentiality was key. We worked with New York Presbyterian Hospital. They offered to provide at no cost any services on a hotline that can be called by our officers anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we worked out an agreement with them. We did an emergency procurement contract. As you all know, sometimes it's not easy to get the services you need and to get these contracts done quickly enough to really make a difference as soon as possible. But we had this emergency contract in place within weeks. It lasts 18 months. We're working on an extension to that already. And that contract, we structured the services so that anyone who calls that hotline, their names will not be revealed to us. We won't know who they are. We built a system that allows us to identify that individual is, in fact, a member of the department, but without knowing who that person is. And so we created that firewall with the ability to get that information anonymously, and we get aggregate data on who's called, who has called, the number of calls, and what services they may be getting. So that's happening now. We started this in October, and to date we have over 140 people who have called the hotline, who have taken advantage of. We got about 81 of them receiving services, And that tells us that we're on the right track with respect to what people will do if they're convinced that the services that they're seeking will be delivered in a way that protects their identity, that protects their, respects their confidentiality, and hopefully this will, they will be in a position where they'll be able to solve whatever the problem is, whether it's depression, whether it's some other issue. The hospital is taking care of that. So those statistics seem to suggest that we're on the right track. We are adjusting and reviewing with a view toward adjusting our medication policy. Some officers go to their own doctors. They may be on medication, and that's happened on occasion where they're taking medication that they shouldn't be taking, and if they're taking that, they shouldn't be carrying a weapon. And so we are looking at that policy as carefully as we can, and shortly we'll release a policy that gives officers some direction and some guidance on how to deal with that medication. Because some of these medications are fine to take and you can still operate and do your job. That's what we want, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Peer support. We spoke with our colleagues in LA, the LA County Sheriff's Office. We didn't assume that we knew everything. We brought in experts, and so we tried to widen the lens in terms of information flow, and we looked at what they were doing in some of those places. We adopted the peer support model from LA. It is great. It gives us the ability, and what we've done now is to have posted requests for volunteers who would be from all over the department, civilian and uniform, to give us information, to come and volunteer to be trained to be not counselors, but people who could at least understand the signs and things to look for, and maybe tap their fellow worker on the shoulder and say, "Hey, is everything all right?" To the extent that they see behavior that's unusual for Ben Tucker. He's usually more friendly and open, but now he seems subdued. They could maybe tap him on the shoulder and say, "Ben, is everything okay?" And if it's not, they can make a referral. They can get the clinicians or the psychologists involved, and so we now have over 100 people. Hopefully by June, we'll have seeking to have 400 volunteers that we've trained, and they're in all parts of the personnel chain, in either the Patrol Services Bureau, the Transit or Housing Bureaus, as well as our civilian officers, administrative side, and so forth. So that is, we think, are going to produce some value for sure. Those that have been trained have already begun to do their jobs, and we're starting to see some of the positive impact of that. We have an app on our smartphones, so I could pull my every cop, we gave our cops smartphones about 4 years ago. Every officer has one, and it's changed the way we do business overall. We do lots of training on those smartphones. We push information out to these officers, and one of the pieces of information is on this app for health and wellness. They can go in, they can see the services that are available either through our employee assistance unit or through our police officers. This is not-for-profit for retired officers, what we call PAPA. There's a whole range of services there. Not only is the information there and the phone numbers are the phone numbers there, but if we go to our chaplains unit, or if you click on chaplains, if you click on liaisons, if you click on peer support, those who are in those respective areas, you will see their picture, you'll have their contact information, you will know who you're dealing with. So, you may not be comfortable dealing with Ben Tucker, but you may be more comfortable dealing with someone else. If you look on and see what's there on the app, it'll give you that information in real time, right there, and so I think it will make a huge difference, and we see people taking advantage of those opportunities. We're focusing on not just mental health, but also physical health. So we're encouraging, and we're thinking about nutrition. We're encouraging people to really think about, and giving them information to think about how they take care of themselves, what exercise can do for some of the stresses, and so forth. So we're trying to sort of give them every opportunity to work on the challenges that they face in a way that will produce positive results and to help them heal, so to speak. We push out a messaging campaign on our website, but also through our union delegates. The unions are really critical to this whole effort, as well as are our executives. So we trained, one of the first things I insisted that we do with the task force was to actually train all 800 of our most senior executives in the department. My view is, as we did with rolling out neighborhood policing, as we've done with body-worn cameras, we now have 25,000 of our personnel wearing body-worn cameras who are on patrol or in specialized units. All of that works in large part, in my view, because you start at the top and you ensure that the most senior people at the top of the agency understand what the officers are being asked to do, understand what services are being provided, and can be supportive of all of the efforts that we as an agency think and realize need to happen. And so we trained all of the senior people. They now have they received 8 hours of training, and that's worked out extraordinarily well. So we've got from the top down, right down to our command staff. We also have done more than 400 sessions for our patrol services, our precinct personnel, 77 precincts, 12 transit districts, and our 9 police service areas or public housing areas. All of those officers at roll call have received training, in some cases multiple times, with clinicians, with our employee assistance personnel, going to them, speaking with them, and giving them the information that is necessary for them in order to take advantage of the services that are provided from those entities. So that is, I hope, gives you a sense of what we've tried to do over this past several months, and what we are continuing to do as we go forward. The call centers are not only available through New York Presbyterian, but they are also available through our employee assistance unit as well. The last thing I'll mention is this area of trying to understand after the fact. Why did someone take their life, and is there something that we can learn after the fact to tell us and give us some hints about what we might do to prevent suicides in the future? So we started doing this, and it's, I think, been very helpful, what we call psychological autopsies. These autopsies are really just a review of the, what took place, what was the individual going through when he or she, leading up to he or she, they're taking their own lives. And and we realized, really importantly, that our Force Investigation Division, who investigates these and responds to these and investigates these incidents, really collect valuable data. They are talking to friends, family, acquaintances, landlords, whatever the situation is, citizens who might have seen something, heard something prior to the event. And that information heretofore had not been shared with our medical division or with our chief surgeon, who also, or with our employee relations folks who also spend time working with the families after the fact and so forth. So we now, through this autopsy, all of that information gets shared, gets spoken about, and gets mapped. And so our goal is to, as we collect this data, we will try and keep, sort of lay it out in a way that helps us understand, what went on in each of the individual cases. The press has asked me over and over again, what was the connection between those 10 people, if any? And it's pretty clear that there was no connection, and there was no particular pattern that you would discern that would suggest that somehow something was happening that they all experienced, and then they chose to do what they did. That's not been the case, and I think typically you won't find that there's a nexus from one case to the next. The impact and the stresses of the stresses on individuals is just different, and so the experts will tell you that you just don't know what that's going to look like, and so I think the autopsies, hopefully, we don't know for sure, but may give us some of that insight and give us the opportunity to really be more proactive in doing what we do. So that is the sum and substance of where we are right now. I will tell you that the group of people working on these issues, as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't discount the fact that this is very emotional, and it drives the way people think about this, and the amount of effort they will go to and put into, and the conversations that happen around this issue was really clear to me, at least. And I mentioned it to the group, and I didn't get anyone telling me that no, that's not the case. But in fact, it was validated that they were driven by, how do we fix this? And I think, if you and all of you out there and with your agencies, as you think about this, just don't, think about the emotional side of it. Sometimes people want to talk about it, sometimes they don't. But if you're working on a solution to this problem, then I think the fact that there is some emotional attachment to the need to solve this, I think makes it, gives hope that you can really get to a point where we learn more about what's happening and take some steps to address it. We continue to push out information to our offices. The unions have been participating, as I mentioned before. We've asked officers to take advantage of something called a program online services that are provided by the U.S. Department of Health, called Shield of Resilience. Very helpful. Officers could take and look at and be involved in reviewing taking this online training through their smartphones. So, and we know there's lots of hits, increased number of hits, where people are learning and taking in information that helps them cope more effectively. So the takeaways are that you can't ever give up on, or you should pay attention to, in fact, changes in people's behavior. You want to remind people to pay attention to the things and what we've heard a lot of is people say, I thought something was up, but I didn't really think it was going to go that far. I didn't think this was the case. And what we're trying to say to people is, if you think for a second, it's almost like if you see something, say something. It's in that realm. It's just about, if you think something's wrong, then maybe it is, and you should maybe tap that person on the shoulder and just ask, are you okay, right? So those are the things that we are trying to encourage, and we hope that we, as a result of some of these efforts, that we get better results. We are also, none of this, by the way, we're focusing on a comprehensive training curriculum as well. The folks in the audience won't see it, but the commissioners will. We've given you some information that the others don't have, that really is the same information we provided to the Attorney General when he visited, and we did a presentation for him. So you'll get to see that. And I say to you all that we're available as we continue to learn. We are certainly available if you have questions as you begin to look at this issue on a national level, to the extent that we can be helpful. I offer anything that you think we can be helpful with, the opportunity to just let me know, and be happy to assist. I want to thank the Attorney General and his staff, and I want to for the opportunity to share this information with you all. We can't do Q&A, but I'm available, and I have cards, and I'll leave them if you want to talk about it. But you can find me at NYPD if you have questions. In the meantime, I'll just wish you all well. Hopefully 2020 will be a better year for us all. I wish you well, and congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. It's obvious that the work NYPD is doing is making a difference in meeting the health and wellness needs of the officers there, which is critical to them, as well as their fellow officers, their families in the city they serve. It's important for us to understand programs like this before the commission. We'll certainly look at the promising practices and best practices we can gain from NYPD and others, and share those recommendations with others. Now I'd like to introduce Erica McDonald, who serves as United States Attorney for the District of Minnesota, and Kathleen O'Toole, who served in numerous leadership positions in a distinguished law enforcement career. Erica McDonald was nominated by President Trump to serve as the United States Attorney for the District of Minnesota and was sworn in June the 11th, 2018. Before taking office, Erica had been a judge in Dakota County since 2009. Prior to her judgeship from 2000 to 2009, she served as Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois and for the District of Minnesota. She began her legal career in 1997 as judicial clerk for Judge James Henry Alicia of the U.S. District Court in Chicago. Ms. McDonald received her J.D. degree with honors from DePaul University College of Law and her B.A. degree from the University of Notre Dame. Like many of you, know and have worked with Kathy O'Toole over the years, she brings a great deal of experience. Chief O'Toole retired from the Seattle Police Department in 2018, and prior to that, served as the Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, and she was the first female commissioner for the Boston Police Department. In 2012, she completed a 6-year term as chief inspector with the oversight body responsible for bringing in reform, best practices, and accountability for the 17,000-member Irish National Police. During her distinguished police career, she was assigned numerous assignments in patrol, investigations, undercover, supervisory capacity, as well as in management areas. The U.S. Attorney will have a timely discussion with Kathy about the social problems that impact public safety, the implications that these have on law enforcement, victims, and our communities. Her unique insight to how we might address these issues based on our own experience in the profession will be impactful. Please join me in welcoming both of them to the stage.
Thank you, Phil, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And good, I guess it's afternoon by now, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, one of the charges from the Attorney General is that the Commission is going to look at socioeconomic factors and how that affects our law enforcement partners, the work they do, how it affects them personally, and how it affects them professionally. And by socioeconomic factors, I mean mental illness, addiction, homelessness. As you heard from Kathy's biography, she has got amazing experience in this area. We've had quite a bit of conversation about this issue. And so our intent today is to talk about, based on her training and experience, what she can offer to the conversation, just to give a brief insight to you as to what the Commission is going to be looking at. So Kathy, my first question for you is, based on your experience, decades of experience, what has changed and what has remained the same about the work of law enforcement?
Thank you, Erica. First of all, I'd like to thank the Director and the Attorney General and also my friends at the IACP for arranging my participation here today. And as I look out at the audience and so many familiar faces, I know we're going to be preaching to the believers. I don't think there'll be any surprises to most of the people out here today, but hopefully, you know, we can telegraph a message that goes well beyond this room, too. Some of the challenges in policing have certainly remained the same, and others have evolved over the years. When I first started in the Boston Police as a beat cop, we were trained to fight the war on crime. It was really go out there, fight crime. We were measured by how fast we get to our 911 calls, how many arrests we made, how many tickets we wrote, and we were crime fighters, and I loved it. I mean, it was an adrenaline rush, and really enjoyed being a beat cop in Boston. But what I discovered in the early days of my career there is that policing went way beyond law enforcement. In fact, law enforcement, the part of it I loved, was only a relatively small percentage of the work I did. We had the opportunity to deliver babies and save lives, and then we ended up facing very complicated issues. I mean, in Massachusetts at the time, they were releasing people from mental health institutions, and day after day, I'd encounter people out in the field and think, what am I supposed to do in this situation? Nobody told me I was going to be doing this work. Nobody told me that I'd need a solution or a strategy to deal with these people. And while I was very sympathetic and I did the best I could, it was really challenging. And I think as time has gone on, we've become really good. We've become better crime fighters, using timely and accurate data to focus on hot spots and prolific offenders and all of that. But in terms of the social services challenges we're facing, they've just increased exponentially, and still police officers aren't necessarily given the tools and the training and the direction to handle those complicated situations. So, while we're here today to talk mostly about the social services challenges we're facing at that intersection of public health and public safety, I want to note that police will always be crime fighters, and that should be at the top of our priority list, but of equal importance are these very significant challenges that are taking up the majority of police time.
When you say the majority of police time, what do you mean?
Well, I read some studies recently that show in major cities across the U.S. that no more than 10 or 15% of time is spent on law enforcement, and the balance of time is spent on responding to calls for service that don't involve law enforcement. In fact, there was one study I read that said that 26% of police officer time in this country is now spent responding to calls for people in serious mental health crisis and in transporting those people to services. So that's significant to think that our police officers are spending more time on that than they are on fighting crime.
When you and I were having a conversation earlier, you gave me some statistics about your work in Seattle and the number of calls that were faced with mental health issues as opposed to homicides. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in Seattle's a city, I think they're approaching 700,000 now, and we had an average of 20 homicides a year in Seattle. Still 20 too many, but 20 homicides for a city that size is pretty remarkable. It was a safe city in terms of violent crime. But we had very, very significant challenges at the intersection of public health and public safety, but we weren't tracking that. We'd had CSTAT, which was our version of CompStat, so we'd meet every 2 weeks, and we were very conscious of our crime numbers. And finally I said, wait a minute, our cops are spending much more time doing this other work, but we're not documenting that. We need to tell our own story. And so we started to document how many encounters we had with people in serious mental health crisis. And year number one, it was 10,000, just about 10,000 encounters with people in mental health crisis. And a more startling statistic that underscored the incredible work that the police were doing is that they were using force in less than 2% of cases. And most of that was minimal force. So our officers were doing a remarkable job in spite of the fact that we hadn't given them at that time lots of training and tools to deal with these complicated issues.
One of the complicated issues that we're going to face is the commission, and the guidance that hopefully we get from our working groups deals with the issue of mental illness that we've just discussed. And I know there's statistics related to the threat that poses to law enforcement. Can you describe that a little bit for me?
Well, I think it's really, I'm not quite sure which statistics you mean, but, I'll say this. I know that I read one study that showed that people in mental health crisis are, people with severe mental health conditions are 16 times more likely police are 16 times more likely to use force or shoot people in that condition. Now, obviously, police don't want to shoot people unless it's absolutely necessary, but many of the officer-involved shootings involve people in mental health crisis. So that not only changes the lives of those families, but it certainly changes forever the lives of the officers involved in those situations. I mean, I've had to engage with those officers, and I've seen how it's changed their lives. So again, it underscores the importance of giving our officers training and tools in these areas, and also harnessing our resources with those in social services to figure out how we're going to resolve some of these complicated situations that our communities are facing.
When you talk about what our communities are facing, in your opinion, based on your training experience, what are the most critical issues facing law enforcement today?
Well, of course, we're always going to be concerned about crime, and some of the crime issues have become more complicated with cybercrime, and some of the issues we're facing with extremism and and homegrown extremism. So, but we're well aware of those issues, and I think that if we continue to apply similar strategies that we have, dealing with guns, gangs, and drugs over the past 20 years, that we'll continue to make progress in those areas. I think two areas that really haven't been highlighted, and I'm really pleased that the Attorney General highlighted them today, are the officer wellness issue and this issue, the complicated issue of policing and social services. And I think that it's time to put those issues front and center as well. So I don't want to confuse anybody here. I mean, I'm a crime fighter, and I think that crime fighting and safety in our communities will always be the top priority of the police, but we're facing equal challenges in these other areas. And I really appreciate that Commissioner Tucker today did his presentation on wellness. We're finally recognizing that we need to give our officers the support they need. Those people out in the front lines, day in and day out, need that support. So I'm really pleased that issue is front and center before this commission as well.
And statistics show that if you've got somebody who is in a right place mentally, physically, and emotionally, they're going to be a better crime fighter, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
When it comes to resources and the potential strain on resources, how do you see those socioeconomic factors, addiction, homelessness, mental health, affecting our law enforcement resources and capacity?
Oh, well, I can tell you from personal experience that it was a huge drain on resources in Seattle. And don't get me wrong, police absolutely have to play a role. I mean, we're the ones who get called 24 hours a day, right? So we have to respond to these cases. But I think police should be in more or less a triage role. Okay, they respond, they're trained well to respond, to try to de-escalate situations, recognize the mental health condition, get the individual to the appropriate resources. So the police should act as triage, but it's a huge drain on resources. Not just, Seattle's just one example. I see it in Boston, as I travel throughout cities in the U.S., and even in less densely populated areas, with the increase in opioid addiction and methamphetamines, police officers in every community are dealing with this every day. And it's a huge drain on resources. And I would say we became much more successful fighting crime, dealing with gang. I recall the Boston Miracle. Back in the 90s in Boston, we finally decided that in spite of all of our hard work, we were failing. The crime rate continued to go up, and young people were taking each other's lives in our streets every night. And we decided to break down barriers across federal, state, local law enforcement. We worked with probation and parole. We got education and health services involved. And within a few years, we were able to have a significant impact on crime in Boston. I suggest that we should be doing the same when it comes to these challenges in social services. We have to come together because we can't just point the finger and say, well, the police need to deal with that issue, or we need to hand this one off to social services. We're going to have to figure out how to work in multidisciplinary approaches much more effectively and harness our resources. Because look, I'm sure social workers are feeling, or mental health workers as well are feeling that they're really up against it, and they're challenged as well. So it's not time for finger pointing, it's time for figuring out how we break down barriers, harness our resources, and work more effectively in multidisciplinary approaches. It worked in crime fighting, and it can work on these issues too.
I agree, and I know that's part of the Commission's work is getting together working groups that will give us sage advice on these different issues. Turning towards, we talked about, first of all, as you all know, Kathy is a lawyer as well. And how did you become a police officer?
Actually, on a dare.
She told me that backstage. I thought you guys should hear that. On a dare, she said she'd do about for a year or 3 months, or how'd it go?
My friends in law school dared me to take the job, thinking it would be a unique opportunity to see the law from a different perspective. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I was in it for only a couple of months when I discovered, this is my true vocation. I think I would have been bored to tears practicing law for a few decades. So I'm.
What does that say about my job?
Maybe
I get to work with all of you. Keep it exciting.
Well, I consider you a crime fighter.
That's
too.
right.
It's a team effort. We're all crime fighters here. Maybe the lawyers should consider a second career.
Part of her analytical approach, though, is using data and using data effectively in looking at the issues facing the community. So my question is, how can we use data more effectively when we're looking at our issues facing law enforcement?
Well, again, I'm going to be preaching to the believers here because we've all seen the huge advantages of CompStat and other programs that have evolved from that. And I think it's wonderful that we have this robust data now at our fingertips, and we have to figure out how we can use it most effectively. So, again, the CompStat model worked in driving crime down, but now we can apply it to social services as well. In Seattle, we developed, we said, okay, we're going to be crime fighters, and that's fine. We're always going to pay attention to Part 1 crime, but let's go out to the individual neighborhoods in the city and have the people and the cops on the front lines decide what they think their priorities should be that go beyond Part 1 crime. And so typically, in a neighborhood, the officer on duty there would go out, meet with the community, and they'd come up with a list of 3 to 5 things that they really wanted the police to focus on. A lot of times it was like low-level drug dealing, homelessness, the quality of life issues. And we worked with Seattle University to develop a strategy so that we could assess the sentiment of people in the neighborhoods. So we could use that data to really inform the way we did our work. We also started to track, as I indicated earlier, how effective we were in dealing with people in mental health crisis. And we developed an app. Because we were encountering the same people day in and day out.
Right.
So we developed an app with the help of Code for America, and we populated that app with the data for all these individuals. So we had the name of their service provider, their doctor, their family members. We had helpful hints for the officers as to how to deal with these people and their specific addiction condition. Some of them were addicted. Their specific mental health condition, to really give the audience, the officers some guidance as to how to deal with these very complicated issues. So I think we can use timely and accurate data to inform our decisions in these areas as well.
And you've talked a bit about, the law enforcement officers coming out of the academy and not realizing how much of their time is going to be spent on these socioeconomic issues when they're responding to calls. How can we align training better with the effective enforcement of our mission?
I think that we've done a pretty good job at recruit training. I think we've recognized the need to hire people who are smart and committed and selfless. And I really appreciated the Attorney General acknowledging that policing is one of the most noble professions, right? And those people who are out in the front lines, we need to give them the tools to do the job effectively. So I think that we've invested in recruit training over the years, and I've seen that evolve, but I think we need to invest a lot more in in-service training. And I remember coming up through the ranks, if I attended in-service training once a year, that was a lot. And it was usually to qualify at the range and to recertify in CPR. And sometimes if resources were strained, we wouldn't do it, that frequently. Now, with the complicated issues officers are facing out in Seattle, we developed programs to teach them how to be crisis responders, to handle people in mental health crisis more effectively. I went to all the training myself because I wanted to see what the officers were getting, and I thought, wow, I wish I had that 30 years ago when I was a young Boston beat cop trying to figure out what to do with these people who were troubled, and I was trying to help them. So giving the officers in-service training, I think, is something that's absolutely essential, more investment in in-service training. And I'm a big proponent of scenario training. Teach what you can in a classroom and, in online content, but, give them the basics there, but get them into a dynamic situational environment using scenarios. I mean, sometimes you can do this online, sometimes you can do it, with technology tools, but I think scenario training is without a doubt the most effective form of training, and I hope we can invest more, and that's in the in-service environment as well as the recruit environment.
For all the folks out there that can go back to their respective communities, what words of inspiration do you have for law enforcement officers at this stage?
Well, I guess the most important message is to the officers who are working out in the field on the front lines. I've been married to one of those guys for 37 years, who loved being a patrol officer, and I'll tell you what, it was such a privilege to serve with them, and it's a very difficult time now in law enforcement, I think, with a lot of the anti-police sentiment that's out there. But I'll tell you what, in every jurisdiction where I worked, in Boston and Seattle and elsewhere, when I went out to the community every day. I was always engaging with the community, morning, noon, and night. And the overwhelming majority of people would say to me, please tell the officers how much we appreciate what they do. Please tell the officers that we support them. We support our police. Unfortunately, that's not always the message they hear when they listen to the radio, when they listen to the television, when they look at social media. But the vast majority of people in this country do support law enforcement and do support our officers out in the field and know how difficult their jobs are. So I would just say, have heart, thank you for what you do. And it's just such a privilege, to be associated with this community.
I have a couple of comments that are similar to Kathy's experience. As a judge, every time I would try a case, I would go back and speak to the jury once the verdict had been reached before I was discharging them from their duties. And I know our Vice Chair, Katie Sullivan, as well, having been a judge, you speak to jurors and you get a lot of good information from them. And without fail, so you all know, they always were complimentary of law enforcement. They were always amazed at the situations that they found themselves in, the restraint they showed in handling themselves. Without fail, compliments were always given to our law enforcement officers who testified. And I think it's important for all of you to know that. Law Enforcement Appreciation Day was a couple weeks ago. And the night before, I asked my office, anybody in the office, if you want to wear blue, just to show support. And I think about 99% of the office had blue on in some way in support of law enforcement that day. So I really think it's important that you all take that message and understand that we really have your back. You have our thanks, we've got your back, and we'll get through this together. The last question I have for you, final question, is where do you see law enforcement in 20 years? What do you think the future is?
Well, I think we'll continue to evolve. In recent years, everybody's talked about police reform. Well, I don't think police reform, we don't just tick the boxes and reform a police organization. I think it's a continuing evolution, and I think we should try to instill a a culture of innovation in our business. And I'm really, again, excited and hopeful that this commission will do that. Because there's always room for improvement. And with the world changing at such a fast pace, I mean, who knows what technology tools will be available to us 20 years from now. But I think we should always try to stay at the leading edge of those technologies. You know, I see that we'll continue to be crime fighters. You know, the crimes we're fighting will be more sophisticated, and we'll have to develop more sophisticated tools. But I hope, too, that, again, we'll harness our resources with other disciplines and work in these multidisciplinary approaches to, because I think that works. Regardless of what challenges emerge, if we work together and harness our resources and our collective experience and thoughts, we're going to be so much more effective.
I agree. I hope you all join me, and her experience is just amazing when you read her biography and having had the chance to talk with her. And I know that I want to echo her thank you to Attorney General Barr. I know the entire commission feels that way as well. We all had a chance to talk briefly before. We are incredibly honored to serve in this capacity, but more importantly, we hope that the work we do will affect generations. And so thank you all for listening today. Thank you to our chair, Phil Keith. Thank you to our vice chair, Katie Sullivan. I'm looking forward to working with our commission. And a huge thank you to Kathy O'Toole for sharing her insights today. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica and Chief O'Toole, for the thought-provoking discussion and helping us bring some important insight into the issues related to homelessness, mental health, mental illness, drug abuse, and how those intersect with and they influence the work that we do in the criminal justice system. Over the coming months, we'll be working with many of you to meet important goals of the mission. We thank you in advance for your commitment, your energy, and your ideas. Together, we'll help make the nation's law enforcement profession stronger, our communities safer, and the administration of justice fair and consistent with the rule of law. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge some of our chief architects of the commission: Tim Shea, advisor to the Attorney General; Jeff Vita, advisor to the Attorney General; Rachel Bissick, counsel to the Attorney General. So without them, we couldn't have made this happen this morning, and so thank you all. This concludes our public portion of today's ceremony. On behalf of Attorney General Barr, I want to thank each of you for attending this historic installation ceremony for the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice. Safe travels, and thank you.